Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Ashmit Kumar and here are the headlines that we're tracking this evening. Ukraine has reportedly struck Russia with a long-range missile just days after US President Joe Biden's approval. Vladimir Putin warns of a nuclear response if Ukraine used Western missiles to hit Russia. Stock markets plunge across Europe and US. Sensex and Nifty snap a 7-day losing streak, but a late sell-off wipes off most of the gains. Mid-caps outperform. The government revises capital restructuring guidelines for state-owned public sector enterprises, mandates companies to pay 4% of net worth as annual dividend against 5% earlier. DPAM Secretary tells CNBC TV18 that the main objective behind the capital restructuring is operational and financial flexibility. Snapchat's global CEO Evan Spiels says there is hunger in the US for a new vision after the victory of Donald Trump, stresses on the need for the new administration to support entrepreneurship and innovation. That's an exclusive. Meta opposes CCI's 213 crore penalty order for anti-competitive practices, says it plans to appeal against it. The regulator ruled that Meta's 2021 WhatsApp policy update on a take-it-or-leave-it basis is an imposition of unfair conditions. Meta claims that users were not forced to accept the update. Insurance stocks slide a day after Finance Minister advised banks to focus on core banking activities and not burden customers with insurance policies they do not require. IRDA chief warns of mis-selling and says banks should provide right products at the right price. Adani Group is in talks to buy infra company PSP Projects. Sources say negotiations are at an advanced stage to buy a 60% stake in the company, which is currently valued at over 2,800 crore rupees. That's an exclusive. Air pollution in Delhi and large parts of North India remain near record high levels. All schools and colleges go online. Multiple flights disrupted due to lack of visibility. State's Environment Minister seeks the union government's clearance for artificial rains. India and the UK agree to resume free trade talks next year after Prime Minister Modi and Keir Starmer meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar meets his Chinese counterpart for the first time since both nations agreed on a patrolling deal at the border. Maharashtra bracing for a two-way battle as it votes in a single phase tomorrow. After 4,000 candidates in the fray for 288 seats, 38 constituencies in Jharkhand also go to polls in the second and final phase. For the first time, 5 lakh passengers take to the skies on the 17th of November, a record high in India over a 24-hour period. Indigo accounted for 70% of the domestic flights. Gukesh could become the youngest world champion, says Indian chess grandmaster and former 5-time world champion Vishwanath and Anand. Also warns Gukesh against getting carried away by the stellar run he's had this year. Well, the top story this evening in what could be a serious escalation in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Bloomberg is reporting that Ukraine has struck Russia territory with a long-range missile. This comes just days after US President Joe Biden allowed Ukraine to use the long-range missiles to strike the cursed region. This is the region where Russia has deployed soldiers from North Korea. Stock markets across the world, across Europe as well as US futures tumbled today after also marking 1,000 days since the conflict began in Ukraine. As these reports trickle in, a Kremlin spokesperson held a press conference and announced a significant change to the country's nuclear doctrine. President Vladimir Putin has signed a new doctrine which allows Russia to engage in a nuclear response if Ukraine uses Western missiles to strike its territory. Here is the Kremlin spokesperson speaking about the new nuclear doctrine.
It was necessary in order to adapt, to ensure an adaptation of our nuclear vision into realities of the modern day. What is the most striking example of the realities of the modern day? Authority in the White House in the United States takes a decision to use their weapon, American-produced weapons, against the Russian Federation. It's a striking example of new environment around our country. And it makes it necessary for us.
Well, meanwhile, back home, the Wall Street snapped its 7-day losing streak. However, a late sell-off saw the Nifty and the sensex wipe out most of those gains. The fall was largely due to reports of Ukraine's strike inside Russia. Prashant Nair joining us now with a quick wrap of all the trading action from the day. Prashant.
It was a strong bounce which finally fizzled out. I mean, I think the highlight of the day came in the fag end of the trading session when news of geopolitical escalation out of the Russia-Ukraine war caused the market to take a very sharp dip. I mean, the change on the Nifty and the Bank Nifty will come up. The Nifty sold off 250 points from the day's high. The Nifty Bank sold off about 500 points from the day's highest level. I mean, till that point, things were looking very nice. We were cruising along. And of course, today also was one of the first few sessions where the market was bouncing from oversold levels, but dramatic twist towards the end. Mid-cap and small-cap indices ended in the green, about 0.5% higher, but there also gains were given back from the high point. Sectorally, PSUs came back, and I think top of the list there, of course, is defense as a pack. Real estate and autos were other two areas which did well. On the downside, there was metals, PSU banks, and energy, which was under pressure. Reliance, of course, contributed to a bulk of the pressure as far as the energy index is concerned. Now, I'll come to stocks. So on the Nifty, Mahindra & Mahindra was a top gainer, about a 4% gain. Tech Mahindra, Trent came up as well from sort of oversold levels. It's come off very sharply from its recent high. On the downside, insurers were a sort of stark underperformer after, of course, Finance Minister's comments. You had SBI Life, HDFC Life, which sort of stood out. Hindalco, I mentioned Reliance earlier, and State Bank of India were some of the other notable losers. Broader markets, advances outnumbered declines, although, of course, I mean, the gap was much wider and that narrowed as the market came off towards the end. Z, IRFC, Apar Industries, Triveni Turbine, you had Kirloskar Brothers, Hyundai, which recovered a little bit. PG Electro Plus was strong from the morning. EID Parry, we had the management with us yesterday. Acum's Drug, Craftsman Auto were some of the names which stood out on the downside. Vari Energy, big pop yesterday. It saw some profit booking. Honasa, no reprieve. And you had a Max Financials, which is, of course, an insurer along with the larger insurance stocks, which also sold off. I think, tomorrow, of course, is a market holiday as Maharashtra goes to polls and Mumbai votes as well. But I think both politics and geopolitics will be important when we come back on Thursday morning. Back to you.
Right, Prashant, thanks a lot for that. Now, speaking of the markets, the rupee recovered marginally after recovery in domestic equity market and dollar rally stalled briefly in early trade. Rupee gained around 2 paise against the US dollar. Now, oil prices fell after yesterday's rally, which was driven by halted production at a Norway oil field. The fall was on account of investors remaining cautious amidst fears of a potential escalation in Russia-Ukraine war. Brent is around the $72 per barrel mark. Meanwhile, the situation in West Asia continues to remain tense. Israeli forces have killed at least 5 people in central Beirut. This was in retaliation to Hezbollah's strike that killed 6 people in Tel Aviv. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has pledged to continue to systematically operate against Hezbollah, even if a ceasefire deal is reached. Meanwhile, the United Nations Middle East envoy has said that the current conditions in Gaza are among the worst we've seen during the entire conflict. Speaking at the UN Security Council, he added that the entire region is at a grim crossroad. Now, back home, the union government has revised capital restructuring norms for state-run companies after 8 years. The dividend payout rule has been relaxed, but rules governing buybacks and bonus has been tightened. Here is DPAM Secretary Tuhin Kanta Pandey speaking to my colleague Sapna Das on the implications of the new norms.
In the minimum guidelines, there were 2 conditions. One was the net worth, another was the payout of the profit. So you have 30% of the profit, PAT.
That remains unchanged.
That remains the same. The other condition was that there were 2 conditions, whichever was higher. 30% of PAT or 5% of net worth, whichever was higher. We have made it 4% of net worth instead of 5%. And the reason is that some of the CPSEs do have their own business plans in terms of capex, in terms of growth, where in their net worth condition sometimes creates a problem. So we have made it clear that, in that case, we will slightly relax it to enable them, sort of more resources for their internal generation so that they would be able to pull into for their growth. The other part was in this case of CPSCs, which are NBFCs, in the nature of NBFCs.
To name a few, sir?
For example, PFC is there, REC is there, IREDA, IRFC is there, HUDCO is there. In these CPSCs, capital is basically the raw material. They don't manufacture. They are basically capital. Their net worth is used to again raise more money and also lend. Now, net worth is important in terms of capital adequacy and other regulatory requirements. So therefore, essentially they are high net worth companies. And if you have a percentage of net worth also as an added condition, when we say whichever is higher, sometimes we would be asking them to give more dividend than what is necessary, and rather their money capital could also be used to lend more. So in any case, that also is advances our objective of giving them operational and financial flexibility in order to grow their business.
Well, here's a CNBC TV18 exclusive. Snapchat's global CEO, Evan Spiegel, has said that there is hunger in the US for a new vision after the victory of Donald Trump. Speaking to Shireen Bhan, Spiegel stressed on the need for the new administration to support entrepreneurship and innovation.
Well, let's talk about what's happening in the US at this point in time. And I remember you did a podcast for the BBC, or you curated one in 2021, I think, and it was about the ideas to reconstruct America. And let me ask you this in the context of what we're seeing happen now with Donald Trump heading back to the White House and, Elon Musk playing the kind of role that he is playing as far as policy making is concerned. How do you see this? Do you believe that this is going to be a transformative period for America specifically? And, what happens in America impacts the rest of the world. How are you reading the changes today?
Yeah, I've always been so interested in, America's progress and some of the big ideas that have come out in American history. Because we're a democracy, we're not sort of centrally planned, but that doesn't mean that there aren't sort of big animating ideas in American history, whether that was, FDR, for example, or Reagan. They both had big ideas that really sort of changed the trajectory of America for decades that followed their presidencies. And so I think it's too early to say whether we're in one of those periods again right now, but I do think there is a hunger in the United States for a new vision, for a new big idea for what the future could look like. And I think one of the reasons why it's interesting you mentioned Elon Musk is one of the things America has done really well over the past 250 or so years is innovate. And I think if you look back to the period of time before America was founded, life expectancy was half what it was today. GDP per capita had stagnated for thousands of years. And I think the innovation that has come out of the United States has played a really important role globally. And so I do think it's important that that continues, that we continue this incredible arc of progress that the United States has been a part of, but also countries around the world have participated in, that I think has really been driven by democratic ideals and the idea that great ideas can come from anywhere. And we should really support entrepreneurship and innovation to drive productivity.
Well, you can catch that entire conversation with Evan Spiegel, CEO of Snapchat, at 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. right here on CNBC TV18. Well, Facebook parent Meta Platforms has opposed CCI's 213 crore rupee penalty order for anti-competitive practices. The company has said that it has plans to appeal against it. The regulator ruled that Meta's 2021 WhatsApp policy update on a take it or leave it basis is an imposition of unfair conditions on users. Parikshit Luthra joining us now with more details. Parikshit, take us through the CCI order and what the response has been from Meta and WhatsApp.
Well, this is a big setback for Meta and WhatsApp in India. 213 crores as penalty. This has been imposed regarding a 2021 policy update whereby, according to the CCI, users of WhatsApp were compelled to accept new privacy conditions, which meant that any data that they share with WhatsApp during their normal course of usage can be shared with Meta and other products of Meta for advertising purposes. This, according to CCI, was compelling users to accept such conditions without any opt-out or review mechanism whatsoever. This, according to the CCI, is an abuse of the dominant position and a violation of the competition law. So CCI has immediately issued a cease and desist order, which means that WhatsApp and Meta will have to stop such practices in India immediately for all their products. And also what they need to do is to ensure that any further updates should have a modify, review or opt-out mechanism, so that in case tomorrow Meta wants to use the data collected via WhatsApp with any product for advertising purposes, it's spelled out properly and there is an opt-out mechanism. There is also a review mechanism for somebody who may have agreed to that condition and wants to review his decision as well. So Meta has said this, they do not agree with this order at all and they will be challenging this. So this is on expected lines. Let's see how this turns out in the courts of law.
Right, Parikshit, thanks a lot for that update. Now, the government has reinstated subsidies for electric three-wheelers under the PM e-Drive scheme. This move comes after the annual subsidy allocation for electric three-wheelers in FY25 was exhausted. The Ministry of Heavy Industries has now sanctioned more funds for electric three-wheelers from the overall outlay of the PM e-Drive scheme. Now, insurance stocks declined a day after Finance Minister advised banks to focus on core banking activities and not burden customers with insurance policies that they do not require. Yash Jain is joining us now for more details. Yash, what did the FM say and how is it likely to impact the industry?
Well, Finance Minister's remarks advising banks to deter from selling insurance and instead focus on core banking operations could very well threaten insurance regulators' vision of insurance for all by 2047. Let's hear out what the FM said.
I wish to say this for due consideration of the bank's boards. While this model has significantly contributed to improving insurance penetration across the country, it has also raised concerns about instances of misselling, and I would say added or contributed in indirect ways of increased cost of borrowing for the customers. So banks will have to look at it with a lot more emphasis on their core banking activities and not burden customers with insurances which they don't require.
Banks, which are the biggest distributors of insurance products, could be forced to prioritize banking products like deposits, FDs and loans in less than 24 hours from the same SBI conclave. IRDAI chairperson replied to the Finance Minister.
When we buy insurance, obviously this becomes a very easy place for me to access, to understand, and I would expect that the bank as a customer would sell me the right product at the right price. So obviously the banker channel is a very useful channel, but of late a lot of ills have crept into the system. I think we all need to sit together, thrash out that so that we restore that confidence, and it should become a distribution model which is low cost. You don't need to run after chasing customers. You have to give the option to the customer, no mis-selling, no force selling.
Insurance stocks ended lower, anywhere between 3 to 5%, a clear reflection of what the Finance Minister's statements could mean for their business. Insurers get a large part of their business from banks' distribution, and hence uncertainty on that distribution creates uncertainty on that large business which they get. Who gets impacted the most and who gets impacted the least? SBI Life Insurance business could be most vulnerable, whereas ICICI Prudential and LIC are expected to be least affected. Why? That is because in the first half of FY25, SBI Life got 60% of its business from bank assurance channel, largely that was State Bank of India. It could be a big ask for an insurer of the size of SBI Life Insurance to shift its business from bank assurance to other distribution channel, and the risk in that overall business could get impacted as far as the interim period is concerned. Also, since SBI is a public sector bank, it would be easier for the government to ask SBI to focus on its core banking operations over insurance products. If LIC is concerned, only 4% of its business in H1 FY25 came from bank assurance, hence it would be least impacted. ICICI Prudential Life Insurance got only 29% of the business from bank assurance and largely from ICICI Bank, which again is not selling large ticket premium products since the last few years and is only selling small ticket premium products like term life insurance, and hence the business would largely remain insulated. HDFC Life gets 65% and Max Life gets 52% business from bank assurance. HDFC Bank and Axis Bank primarily for both of them. The threat from them is still limited as these are private banks and we still don't know how much a government advisory would impact the business at these banks until and unless RBI also does not decide to take the same line as the finance minister.
Right, Yash, thanks a lot for that. So some concern there for insurers, specifically private insurers. With that, it's time now to slip into a very short break. But coming up, Vishwanath and Anand has a message for Gukesh as he prepares for the World Championship final. Stay with us to find out more. Now, Indian chess grandmaster and five-time world champion Vishwanath Anand has said that Gukesh could become the youngest world champion. Speaking to CNBC TV18, Anand also warned Gukesh against getting carried away by the stellar run that he's had this year. Take a look.
And then if we take Gukesh individually, he's the youngest ever candidate in history. Therefore, he could be the youngest ever world champion in history. He's had the better year. He has outperformed Ding, no question about that. But first of all, matches have their own logic. And so here he'll have to fight from the first game. I expect his opponent's form will improve significantly, when confronted with the reality that he's playing the World Championship. And second, in an individual match, other dynamics take over. So it's very much a struggle that will begin in a few days. And we shouldn't get too carried away with the past results at this point. The funniest story I remember is once when Gukesh had a very, very disappointing result during the Olympiad. I went to cheer him up a little bit. So I went to his room expecting to find him slightly distraught. And within 10 minutes, he was trying to cheer me up. He said, "Why don't we go and play some table tennis? So, I think you're quite affected by this game, sir," and so on. I thought that showed his composure as well.
What did you, if you don't mind, can you share what was the conversation like? What did you tell each other? Because, in such testing times, in such difficult times, it's that word of comfort or that one sentence that puts you at ease. So what is it that you tell each other when things are going south?
Well, I have had really disappointing results, obviously, at some point or the other. And it's taken me a while to get over them. I mean, and the full impact of what I've done hits me. And then, so I tried to go to his room and tell him he shouldn't just wave it away, but, acknowledge that it happened and then try to feel better about it and so on. So I was trying to get him to talk about it. But in fact, his approach was different. He genuinely pushes the past aside and starts again.
Well, you can catch that entire conversation with the five-time world chess champion at 7 and 10 p.m. tonight only on CNBC TV18. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. But before we let you go, we leave you with the visuals of a performance by PVR's Ajay Bijli and his music band at the CNBC TV18 Global Leadership Summit. Take a look.